Hi guys, glory to Jesus Christ. So, those of you who watched the last video can understand why I feel like my brain is still in a total fog of horrible numbness. Um, I'm so upset, I'm almost not upset, if that makes sense. I'm just like. So, I thought maybe to think about something more positive for a while, I would answer another question that I recently got, which was from a Protestant who said, I know you are a convert, meaning me, am a convert. Me convert, you Jane, to Orthodoxy from Protestantism. Would you mind explaining how and why you made that decision? And I will do my best to explain. It's very, very hard to do in a 15-minute YouTube video, so I'll do my best. Okay. I grew up in a suburb of Buffalo, New York, and for all of my childhood and most of my adolescence, I attended a Lutheran church, actually two Lutheran churches. My mother is an organist, and she actually didn't work at full-time at either of the two churches, but she did a lot of substituting in the area and stuff, and, both of my parents are musicians, as I am, so they were attracted not only to the theology of Lutheranism, but also because, at least at the time, the music was very traditional. It was very good. There wasn't any of this, rock, jazz, drum kit stuff going on. So, during those years, we went to church once a week, sometimes more. I went to Sunday school. My parents went to adult education. I was an acolyte. My dad eventually was a communion server. We were involved in the church, such as it was. So I had a foundation of, basic Bible stories. Most of the good theology that I got was actually from the hymnal. The Lutheran Church chorales, for example. Some of them are a little bit iffy in the theology, but a lot of it really stuck with me. Music is one of the most effective teaching tools for anything. Because even when people forget shapes or colors, or they forget things that they have read, they tend to remember what they've heard. So as a child, singing, over and over and over again, these beautiful hymns, it had a profound effect on me, and I didn't really realize how profound that effect was until much later, but it was there nonetheless. Now, when I was about 15, 16-ish, I got my first church job. I was taking voice lessons from a woman who was the organist and choir director at a gigantic Congregationalist church in the city of Buffalo. Actually, I guess it was technically Kenmore, which is another suburb, but it was much closer to the city than we were. And she hired me to sing in the adult choir because they needed some help. And so for, I guess, 2 years, maybe 3, I think it was 2, I attended this church, and it was a huge church that had 10 choirs. Yes, 10 choirs. Very welcoming congregation. Theologically, they believed in everything and nothing, But that was okay with me at the time, because I was 15 years old. So, I eventually quit that job, and I don't quite remember why. I think it was because I changed voice teachers, because the technique that I was learning from this teacher wasn't really good. It wasn't like a dramatic exit or anything. I just, made a choice. And so I started going to a series of different churches for the next 5, 8 years. First up was a cult. Woo! Somebody that my mother worked with was involved in this cult that rented out space from a local Jewish temple, if you can believe that. And I was involved with them for very briefly until it became clear to me that what they were teaching was just, it was completely nutso. So I left there, glory to God. Then I went to college. And for the next couple of years, I was an Episcopalian, because in the eastern United States, if you want good church music, you go to the Episcopal Church, because they have money. Okay. So I worked at a series of increasingly prestigious in the musical world Episcopal churches. Okay. I was also growing up at that time. You know, I was on my own. I mean, I was in college, but I was no longer living with mom and dad. And so I had a lot of figuring things out that I had to do. And of course, being surrounded by ultra, ultra, ultra liberals theologically. I went to a music conservatory, so yeah. I began to realize something was wrong. Something was rotten in the state of Denmark. Except something was rotten in the state of Daria. Because what I began to realize was that almost nobody that I knew, and this was the professionals, this was my fellow students, this were the professors, it was even the people who just attended these churches and, you know, sang in the choir or whatnot, and they hired a paid quartet to help them sound better. Nobody really believed what they were singing. They believed the happy, clappy, easy parts of it, but anytime, for example, you sing a Requiem Mass and you get to Dies Irae or Confutatis Maledictis, which is about, you know, the wicked will be confounded in the last day and sent to eternal fire, they didn't really believe that. And so I realized that, well, they are either right or wrong, and I need to know which. This is important. Either religion is going to not be a factor in my life at all, and I'm going to be an agnostic, or it's going to be my life. Because if you read the Bible, if you listen to good, solid doctrine preaching, you realize that you must choose. Christianity, you know, is exclusive. It's an exclusive gospel. Meaning, the Lord said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, not one of many, but one. So, did I believe Jesus or not? At the time I was trying to figure this all out, I met yet another of the long line of Orthodox people that had come into my life since I was about 10. And interestingly, as much as I bounced around various Protestant churches as a child and as an adolescent and as an early, you know, young undergraduate student, I had never been to an Orthodox service before. For no reason. You know, it wasn't like my parents had told me, oh, you stay away from them. No, not at all. But I just never been exposed to it. But I started to be exposed to it because I met a couple people. And I don't even think most of them know the profound impact they had upon me. Because it wasn't that they were preaching at me. They weren't coming up to me or to anybody else trying to force us to go to Divine Liturgy. But it was just the way they lived their lives. And the explanations that they gave for things, when someone would say, you know, for example, well, why can't you take a church job at a Lutheran church? And I heard one of them say, well, it's because I don't believe in that doctrine. You know, I'm Orthodox. I must be at an Orthodox church. So, and you know what the most profound thing was, believe it or not, was singing at school. Singing Orthodox music. Because there's a substantial canon of works, I'm thinking specifically of the All-Night Vigil by Sergei Rachmaninoff, which is absolutely gorgeous, and it's a cappella, it's very difficult, and of course it's a favorite of college choirs because yes, it's difficult, but it's not super, 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 super hard. It's not Frida auf Erden. It's not the Verdi Requiem. And when I was reading these texts, something was clearly going on. Something was clearly different about this versus everything else. It was as if I had another sense, you know, my 5 senses plus 1. And I don't mean that weird I see dead people intuition. It was something else. It was here. It wasn't here. It was here. And I went, oh. Something serious is happening inside me when I read these words. And there was a composition student at my conservatory who actually I work with frequently now. And looking at the music of his compositions that he was conducting for his recital, you know, they were taking off from the Orthodox services, and it was like my eyes got opened. My problem was the Orthodox don't ordain women. And because I didn't understand what the priesthood really is. You know, I was coming at this from a Western perspective where being a pastor or a minister is a job. You know, you go to seminary, then you get ordained, and then you can do whatever. You can go be a church minister, you can go be a minister in the military, you can do whatever. But it's a job. Okay. There was none of this sense of the numinous and the truly sacred existing, you know, in eternity outside of time. I had never heard of before, you know, the priest performing, you know, kind of representing Christ, presenting the sacrifice of his body and blood, Christ's body and blood, to Christ himself. None of that at all. The mysticism, none of it. I'd never experienced it before, and so I got offended because the Orthodox don't ordain women. But eventually I got so miserable in my current state, God was like, all right, Daria, you know what? I'm going to let you stew in your own theological juices until you realize that right now that you're dead, and so are most of the people around you. Life is short, eternity is long. Get your butt to the church. And that's exactly what happened. Because the years that followed were dark. I did a lot of really evil stuff. I mean, I was dead. I didn't really know it. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't really understand. I was dead. Okay. So finally, I became really close friends with a Ukrainian Orthodox graduate of my conservatory. And we went up to St. Tikhon's Monastery, which is in northeastern Pennsylvania. It's outside of Scranton. And it's in South Canaan. And I wanted to go up with him because there's a Memorial Day pilgrimage there every year. And I had heard that there was going to be the body of a saint there that was incorrupt. And I think it was St. Alexis Toft. But I don't quite remember. But I was like, we need to go. I need to see this, right? Doubting Thomas. So we left at like 5:30 in the morning. We made this epic drive up there because where I lived at the time, it was a 3.5-hour drive. And I had never been to an Orthodox service before. And within 10 seconds of the service starting and the hierarchs marching in, because it was a hierarchical liturgy, so you had the Metropolitan there, you had bishops from all over the world, actually. Within 10 seconds, I kid you not, 10 seconds, I went, this is the truth. I don't know why. I can't articulate it to you, but I know this is the truth. Now, interestingly enough, after the service was over, we had lunch, we toured the museum on the grounds, went to the bookstore, went into the monastery church. The relics of this incorrupt saint, they either weren't there or they were covered up. I didn't see them anyway, and you know what? I don't care. I came away from that, you know, I entered that pilgrimage as a doubting Thomas, but I came away as a not doubting Thomas. Because what happened was, the deep called to the deep. And I knew, with a knowledge surpassing knowledge, that this was the truth. So we drove home. I had been married for about 6 weeks at that point. My husband was Roman Catholic. He's now Orthodox. I walked into our apartment and said, I want to be an Orthodox Christian. And then the rest is history. I know it's not really history. I'm going to talk about it more in a second video, but I have to finish this one up because I'm at 14 minutes. I'm going to stop the camera. I'm going to reload. I'm going to keep going so I don't have to rush. Okay, so see you in a minute.